we have an ambitious plan in front of us, I don't think people are even going to focus and try to get there. I think one of the questions was why the private sector is not being able to move forward. I think we've not had a lot of policy clarity. We've not had long-term commitments to the power sector. And in the face of that, it's impossible for investors to take investment decisions and convince investors to lend to this sector. I think with the new government, we're also seeing a lot of change on that side. There's a lot more clarity on policy, which is essential to drive this sector. We're seeing a lot more discussion on smart grids. We're talking a lot more about hybrid projects, energy storage, interconnection of state grids. I think that's something which I don't understand, and I think that's something which is very silly. We are one country, but at the end of the day, we've got grids which are northern grid, southern grid, and between these two grids, we don't have power flowing out. So you've got surplus power in the north of India, and you have south, which is reeling under a lot of pressure. And where power rates in the north are close to 4 rupees, you've got the southern grid, which is buying short-term power at 7, 8 rupees. And then we say renewable energy is not at grid parity. You know, I would like to talk about what we've done in the past 5 years since I came back and I started INOX Wind. Just to give a flavor that if there is ambition and if there's clarity of policy, certainly the private sector can change the way India is going to generate power in a sustainable manner. I think when I came back about 5 years ago from Carnegie Mellon, the writing on the wall was pretty clear. A lot of the global economies had started their transition towards lower cost or lower carbon economies. Globally, mandates were clear that 20 to 30% of all power needs to come from renewable energy. Whereas in India, we still had a lot of policy flip-flops. People saying wind is unsustainable, wind to pankha hota hai, solar rooftop pe lagta hai, solar pump chalta hai, and so on and so forth. A lot of bureaucrats believe that renewables is rubbish, and that's more icing on the cake than serious business. We focused on scaling up renewables in India. We did that by focusing on what was happening globally. We focused on the right technology for India. We bought in larger turbines. We bought in turbines with higher hub heights. We bought in turbines with larger rotor diameters. In fact, we were probably the first turbine company in India to come out with class 3 turbines, which are low wind side turbines, such that you can enhance productivity and at the same time reduce cost of power. By doing that, we were actually able to reduce the cost of generating renewable power by close to 20%. Mr. Roy Choudhary may beg to differ, but I mean, today at about 4.5 rupees, the cost of renewables would probably be at grid parity if you look at it in a prudent manner, keeping in mind the medium-term cost of power, and impute a cost of carbon to that, which honestly the developed countries are doing, but probably developing countries are still lagging behind. I mean, at INOX Wind, what we also ended up doing was we created a huge land bank. You know, you've got a lot of ROW issues in India. You've got a lot of infrastructure bottlenecks. How do you convince investors to come in and invest in renewables and make them believe that renewables is sustainable and the way forward? By controlling a large land bank and investing in infrastructure in advance, we were able to take care of a lot of issues which come in any infrastructure project in India. Illegal ROWs, local political issues, and a lot of other adverse social impacts which prevent projects from coming on board. We're now working towards solar and wind hybrid projects, which would lead to enhancing renewable energy in the grid by using the existing infrastructure. I think all in all, before I sum up, I think we're looking at 2 or 3 things which, if we get from the government, I think renewables could explode and we could probably be on the path or close to achieving the targets which Modi ji has set out for the renewable energy sector. I think there needs to be a lot of clarity and commitment and long-term commitment for renewable energy. I think we're seeing a lot of that with the new government, with the renewable generator obligation, with the National Clean Energy Fund, and the fast tracking of the green corridor. Of course, we need to continue with our efforts on that front so that we can grow this sector. I also think we need to focus a lot more on bringing capital into India. There are a lot of multinational agencies, a lot of the largest funds globally, and a lot of pension funds who are sitting on the wayside wanting to invest. In fact, in the recent IPO, which we just did for INOX Wind, which was about $200 million, there was so much demand. People were willing to cut checks, ticket sizes of 200 million each. But what they wanted was clarity on compliance, clarity on PPAs, and bankability. You don't want to go into a state where you've got a policy, but at the end of the day, bureaucrats say that we don't like renewables, and now we're not going to sign PPAs, irrespective of there being a policy. I mean, everybody can't use political connections and so on and so forth to get their work done. So I think enforceability of policy measures and PPAs is extremely important. And I think there'll be no dearth of capital flowing into the country. To conclude, I think some would always argue that climate change and moving to a cleaner energy economy is not right. It's too costly and will lead to a lot of job losses on the thermal side. I think we've proven them wrong in many instances globally and also in the short span of 5 years in India. I think it's time we seize clean energy opportunities before us and grow this in a sustainable manner such that India can develop and our future generations get a clean India. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Devansh. Very promising, and I like the fact that you're challenging established norms, players, as well as policies. I think that's something which will happen. A quick point, I mean, if any of you are on Twitter, please feel free to send your questions on the hashtag AIMA NLC. I'm already receiving a couple of questions on my Twitter feed, so I'll be happy to take some of them when we have an interactive session. I've already got a question for Devansh on Twitter. But Mr. Choudhary, the question really is about not looking at coal-based power in isolation, not looking at grids in isolation, and really connecting everything for the larger goal of powering the country. Part of it is policy, part of it is also the fact that players don't want to cooperate with each other. So how can we build an ecosystem that there is more of a mission approach to generating power and reaching it to everybody, and rather than looking at it in silos?
I think we must go back to what Mr. Sanjiv Goenka said in the beginning, that power sector is a very complex sector. And we all think that we know about everything about it. But together, all of us here in the hall may know everything about it, but we all actually think from our own silos. What's very important is ultimately any product, any businessman, private or public, would know that whatever you produce, if it is not sold, there is no business. On any day, I have an installed capacity of 44,000 megawatt. Believe me, at any moment, the power which is drawn by the country is 28 to 30,000 megawatts. Now, if we are not able to address that end, we may keep up arguing about non-parity, compatibility, differences between public and private sector. Now, that's something which Mr. Goenka raised, that probably there is no level playing field between the two sectors. Now, let me tell you, we feel the other way. We feel the private has an advantage today in this government. And we jokingly say that this government is run from Mumbai. So, you know, it's a thing which I think intellectually a forum must be made to discuss. That what do you think is the advantage with the public sector that a private sector does not get? You know? And there are many, many, many advantages that the private sector has. But I can understand the risk-taking capability of a public sector and private sector are different at different levels. So that can be discussed and debated point-to-point basis. You know, for example, when I say that I want to set up 25,000 megawatts of solar power, now believe me, I'm doing as a responsible RGO obligation even before the RGO obligation has come, limited to 10,000. 10,000 will be capital infused by NTPC. It will be generated by NTPC. It will be on my balance sheet. But 15,000 megawatts, I want to test the industry, which is mostly the private sector, in which, what Devansh was saying, an option will be there for foreign investors to come in. And what do NTPC do by coming into that space? It gives the comfort to the generator that NTPC will buy that power. To the foreign investor, we are going to give the comfort that we'll pay you in dollars. That means your tariff, you will quote me in cents. So you take away your money in cents. You don't bother about currency variation. You don't bother about hedging. Now, this is the message I want to give this house. And I'm extremely enthused that young entrepreneurs like them are in the market doing this. Now, both these models, it's not that the public sector here is in competition with private sector. I want to explain that NTPC has stepped in only to facilitate this entire exercise. Yes, we remain basically, by and large, a thermal power generator. And today, a thermal power generator with coal, because gas is no more available, and historically, we have been doing thermal power generator. Now, just look at this. In 1975, this company was set up, 44,000 megawatt it has today. If it was not there, and the state electricity boards, you know how the position is, what would have happened to the country's power situation? That's one question which every citizen needs to ask. We talk of all this because there's a base. If there was no base, we had no talking point. So what I'm trying to say is that this industry is one. There is no public or private. There is no solar, wind, renewable, nuclear, hydro. All is one. They come into the energy basket of the country. And the energy basket of the country needs to have a buyer. And the buyer needs power at affordable cost. So therefore, how you do the economics of selling the power, how you do the economics of buying the power. He said grid parity. If it is 4.5 rupees, yes, I can accept grid parity. But for whom? For 30% of India's population. More than 40% of India's population cannot pay 3 rupees also. So where are we? So therefore, I think when we talk of these things, we have to understand in totality where we are. And we cannot do 100% perfection on day one. The exercise today by the present government, the very proactive minister and the Honorable Prime Minister, is that we take things forward. And as long as NTPC can step in and encourage fresh investments, we will be more happy to put our hands up and encourage investment. Does that answer your question, or you wanted something else?
No, that answers my question, but now the onus and the ball is in Sanjiv's court. Sanjiv.
No, I'm not fighting him on this dais, but...
No, but broadly it does, sir. But again, it requires an ecosystem to be changed and every player has to play its role.
A lot of changes has to be made.
Correct. But Sanjiv, the point he made that from the public sector perspective, he feels private sector has the advantage. Would you agree?
You know, I think it's not about private sector versus public sector. Quite honestly, it's about the power sector in the country moving ahead, creating enough generation capacity at an affordable price, having the right kind of grid, having the right kind of customer centricity, giving the right quality of power to the consumer, making 24-hour power available at every village. I think we've got to work hand in hand. Frankly, this versus that, I think it's time to now think of this and that.
True. We have a little bit of time left, but what I'm going to do is next few questions I'm going to ask from the responses we've received on Twitter. And I'll tell you why, because sometimes the questions you ask on Twitter are very concise and brief and they don't waste our time. And of course, I'll open the floor for all the members present here also. One of the issues, for example, Devansh, which has come for you from one of the followers, he asked that, there's a serious issue of pollution in large cities, including the city we live in, which is Delhi. Can wind power actually help a city like Delhi?
Well, honestly, the answer to that is pretty obvious. Clearly, renewable energy can help in any city. Of course, we can't set up wind farms in every part of the country because it's dependent on whether there's enough wind in that region, or if you're talking of solar energy, whether there's enough radiation coming in that region. But I mentioned that if we look at India in totality and we talk about grids being interconnected, I mean, the ideal situation would be we set up wind farms in, let's say, Gujarat or Rajasthan, which are wind-prone zones, and bring that power into areas which need clean energy. At the end of the day, you need grids. It's not whether I generate power in Gujarat or in Delhi. The grids need to be interconnected. such that we can use more and more renewable energy in the system. And surely, if that does happen, every part would see a lot of the pollution going down.
Sure.
Now, I just want to add to what he said, because you said Delhi pollution. Delhi pollution is not linked to power generation. And people get the misconception that Badarpur is very near, so it's polluting Delhi. Most of the units in Badarpur are shut down already. Actually, Delhi pollution, you must understand, those of you who grew up in Delhi, like I did, in the 70s or late 60s, after the evening, you could actually sleep outside in Delhi and still need a blanket to cover yourself in the morning. That was how the temperature of Delhi or the environment was. Now, then look at the amount of traffic which moves in Delhi during the day, during the night. And somebody must do a pollution check on account of this huge diesel traffic which moves whole night across Delhi, vis-a-vis what is happening during the daytime. Look at the amount of cars we have. We have more cars than all the other metros put together. So these are all creating pollution in the environment. So we must understand that, as he rightly said, the solution is not by bringing wind power from Rajasthan into Delhi, and you will not find that the environment will improve. It needs more than that to improve. I just wanted to add that for Delhi.
One of the question that I've received, and perhaps Mr. Roy Choudhary, I can come to you, is also about the leakage in power, the issues of distribution, which really haven't come through. Again, this also is a domain of the state governments and the regional government bodies. How do we address that? This question is from Rajiv Khurana, and the earlier question on Delhi was from Ashlint Katiyar.
Let me tell you that we are definitely into, roti, kapda, makan and bijli concept, And as a country, we've grown up in that concept. We wanted the roti, we wanted then the kapda and then the makan. And the bijli somehow, pani, bijli came in that same bracket. Unfortunately, electricity is not free. We must understand that there's an economic cost of electricity. And that is why when you say theft or T&D losses, we have to improve our distribution system, if not to the international standards, at least to the best in the country. We have states we are doing less than 10%, almost 10%. Once you can do that, then you look at the mobile phone. Everybody pays for his mobile phone, even it is a very poor segment of the society. He owns a Bergman phone, he's paying for it. Why is he paying for it? Because he gets 24/7 reliable mobile connectivity. Now, if you provide 24/7 mobile connectivity and you avoid this so-called theft, I think power affordable can be. So it's all a matter of mindset, how we get the mindset right in this. That's what I feel.
Right. For you, Devansh, which I think I request Sanjiv also to respond. Clearly, especially for renewable energy, now wind farm needs land, right? That's a fundamental requirement. Now, what are the challenges that you face on land issues with regard to renewable energy?
The beauty about wind is that while you need a huge tract of land, you honestly have just a tower which is going on the ground. And for that, you need a very small piece of land. And you need a right-of-way access to that. So it's not like you need 50 acres of contiguous land or thousands of acres of contiguous land. For a typical 2 megawatt turbine, you probably need half an acre. That's about it. So honestly, we don't have too many issues on the land side. The problem we face is that when you try and get those small parcels, there are a lot of local issues, local sensitivities, local politics which comes into play, who dictate that you end up picking up the whole piece. Now, if you're going to go and pick up 50 acres of land for a turbine, it's going to lead to things being uncompetitive. So honestly, I think every sector and every business is going to face some issues. I don't want to make a big deal about acquiring land.
But in your case, it's not mutually exclusive. You can have a wind farm and still have other activities there, right?
That's right. So again, you just need that half an acre in a 50-acre plot.
Right.
But what ends up happening is because of local political issues and local sensitivities, if you don't plan well in advance, which again stems from the fact that we don't have clear policies. Now, if you have clear policies, clear commitments, you can start acquiring these parcels, these small parcels of land well in advance, where you don't succumb to local pressures. honestly, what happens on the renewable side, or what had been happening in the past, we typically had policies being announced into the middle of the year. So you had about 5 or 6 months to set up projects. Now you can't build 220 kV transmission lines, substations, and set up 200 odd megawatts of wind farms or solar farms in 4 or 5 months and not succumb to local pressures. So honestly, if we have clear policies, you can plan things in advance to avoid these issues. And of course, there will always be issues and impediments in any business you do, but I don't think they're unsurmountable. And I think they can be dealt with in a fairly reasonable manner.
Thank you. That question was from Sanjiv Kumar Sanju. But to you, the same issue really about is land the key issue, or do you see other challenges which are more of a problem for you?
Well, I think land is clearly a issue. I don't know whether it's the fundamental issue. And say in our distribution companies, when we are acquiring land for substations or to erect the grid, we actually had a situation where out of 320 towers, we had 318 erected. And the last two, the landowners of the last two, were instigated by the local politicians to ask for 10 crores per acre for what was worth not more than 2 lakhs an acre. And so there is this, if I may say so, this a little bit of the blackmail element which